So the next step in an external analysis, again, following Dr. Porter's suggestions as put in the Thompson-Strickland book, what are the next strategic moves? So what moves are my competition likely to make? Certainly we're seeing more and more imports, for example, going back to pork and dairy, we're seeing more trade going on and more imports, and so that's a big issue. Think about something like eggs. We don't really have good substitute products for eggs. So from that standpoint, we're not going to see any development on the horizon of a substitute for egg product, but we do see non-animal meats coming in, for example, in pork and beef and other things. So what are the changes? We're not going to see any big changes in eggs, but we might see changes coming if people even substitute a little bit of non-animal meat. Key success factors, again, typically we have the second bullet point there. If we do something, we will be successful. So, for example, a farmer might say, after visiting several new facilities, I knew we had to milk at least 120 cows per hour per worker in order for expansion to be successful. That's an example of a key success factor, to be cost efficient. The groups of these are based around these 7 types of things. Again, if you take 4821, you'll do more of these in depth, and so we're not going to go through those, but they tend to be related to these different broad categories and different buckets as you look about your farming operation. And then part of this external analysis is you've got to sum up. So how attractive is this industry to be in? Typically in agriculture, you're going to say, if I'm cost efficient and I'm able to take advantage of growing trends, whatever that might be, this is going to make things more attractive. So if I'm in dairy and I'm cost efficient, and I got a place to sell my milk, it's an attractive industry. If I'm in western North Dakota where I haven't got a milk processing plant, the odds are I'm not going to be cost efficient because my milk has to travel a long way to the processing plant in northern Utah or all the way to Fargo. The odds are my costs will not make me successful, even though I may want to milk cows in that geography. And so that helps you understand whether or not the industry is attractive and whether or not I can be profitable in that industry. So that's the external factors. Now let's look at internal factors, things that are internal to our farming operation or firm. So culture is a big part of this. So shared values, culture, personal ambitions. If we all think the same, being involved in regenerative agriculture, for example, is very difficult. You have a change in tilling practices. Your fields don't look like the fields you grew up with as a child, for example. Things are a lot messy. There's more trash on the field, if you will, in terms of last year's corn stalks or whatever that might be. But to make regenerative agriculture work, everyone on the farm, employees, family members, and so forth, have to be involved in that decision. And then we look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and typically that SWOT, which is where the S, W, O, and T come from, are a big part of that. So, just like we had a set of questions we look at for the external analysis, we've got a set of questions that we're looking at for the internal analysis. How well is what we're doing right now working? Let's go through our SWOT. Are we competitive on our cost? How strong are we from a competitive positioning standpoint? And then what are the big issues that we need to address? So, how well is our farm doing based on our balanced scorecard? Which is why the balanced scorecard has to have quantifiable targets, as we talked about in the last chapter. Competitive advantage tends to be built around things like efficiency, quality, innovation, customer responsiveness. And so if we can do these things to the satisfaction of our buyers, those who are buying with us, our customers, the better off we're going to be. So, a SWOT analysis, again, I talked a bit about those and what that acronym looks like. Typically, we put this in a form and try to look at good versus bad, or maybe not bad, but poor is a word typically I would use. And then the internal and external things, what are some things that opportunities that we can focus on that are attractive for us, and what are some external things that are going to affect our operation and be a challenge for us or a threat. So once we do that, there's something in the old days they called this a TOES matrix, which is the inverse of the word SWOT. How do you use those things to make a decision? And that's literally what these 5 questions are looking at. What are those things that we should be looking at as part of a SWOT analysis and going through those? This is more difficult because oftentimes people don't give you your costs, right? So that's why farmers try to benchmark themselves. So, for example, the Center for Farm Financial Management at the University of Minnesota has got lots of data from almost 24 states of different farmer records, and so they try to help you look back in time and looking at historical data to see whether or not you can benchmark yourself against farms of a similar type and system. And so these tend to be things like, first of all, you want to benchmark yourself based on how well you're doing in the past. So the way I can benchmark myself is what I've done previously to have a knowledge of what I'm doing in the future. And then are there some world-class benchmarks I should be at? So oftentimes land-grant universities will have budgets or cost estimates that I can compare myself against, or databases like I just referred to help you do that. How do we measure our strengths? So if that's looking at the strategy part of it, how do we measure our strengths? One way of doing this is to look at our different strategies, the costs, whether or not we've got things that are involved in the growth areas. Do we have profits greater than other people? Or is our farm of sufficient size and scale that we've got better profits and lower cost? What do people think about our management skills? Are we quick to make changes if we can in terms of new products or categories? Weaknesses are just the opposite of these. Are we constrained by capital? Or do we have a cost structure that's higher than where we ought to be, which will cause us to lose ground over time? Are we considered a high-cost producer? Are we stuck with the technology that doesn't allow us to be cost efficient? Those are all things to keep in mind. So the last part, just like we looked at the external analysis, is the industry attractive and therefore will give us greater profits in the future? The purpose of an internal analysis is, what are the issues that we need to be addressed to be successful? In order to take advantage of an attractive industry with higher profitability, what are the things that I've got to do inside from a strategy perspective to be successful? So that's what we looked at in Chapter 8, the external analysis of the firm and internal analysis. As I talked about, if you take courses over in Carlson or take Applied Economics 4821W, you'll get to see more and more of this stuff.